And you guys thought I was done with things to recap. Silly you! I found more things to recap. So I'm not done. Harumph. Today, we're going to look over one of the three different types of, you guys might recall them, we called them the My Perfect Draft shows from the preseason, where, depending on whether you had a pick relatively early in the first round, so, like top 4, middle 4, or late 4, I gave you the players that I was basically hunting at each one of those junctures. Let's go to the board, ladies and gentlemen. By the way, I'm Dan Vespris. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I still can't believe that the YouTube page is actually growing in the off season. The traditional pod is sort of hanging steady. But that's, I don't know. My mind is boggled. It feels like it should be going the other way, and you guys are amazing. So, again, follow on Twitter at Dan Vespris, Old Man Squad on Twitter and on Blue Sky. So this is what it looked like at the beginning of the year, and we're just going to go through it slide by slide here. My favorite value play from the beginning of each round. So today we're going to be looking at if you had basically a pick in the first 3 or 4 slots of your draft and how that would have gone for you as it snakes back and forth through each of the first 10 rounds. You can see this is what I had typed up for the third board. This is a nice exercise to isolate decent players that occur at set intervals during your draft. Basically, here are guys that are off and around. Not always, but based on their pre-ranks and ADP data, guys that you can often get at your area in each round. We begin. Nikola Jokic. That was an easy one. You have an early pick in the early first round. Nikola Jokic is the way to go. You guys know this was the player that I've been talking about all preseason long, that I didn't think anybody else was about to jump over him in rankings. And lo and behold, nobody jumped over him in rankings. So that was a pretty straightforward one. I don't think we need to talk too much about it. Second round, with a pre-rank of 22 at the time, at least, of recording this particular show in the preseason, was Karl-Anthony Towns. And if you guys disagree, well, I mean, that's the wrong thing. If you guys don't believe me when I'm doing some of these recap shows, I'm like, yeah, we were like medium high on Towns. There's just more old PowerPoint evidence that he was a guy that I felt was a really, really, really good pick because he was going towards the middle end of the second round. We had him in a bucket to go towards the beginning of the second round. Actually, he outperformed even that, especially with the reasonable health this year. This one turned out to be a pretty good selection in the second round as well, because Cat finished in the middle of the first round, and you were able to get him at a nice, solid discount. Third name we had on the board was LeBron James. This would be for sort of an early third round pick. But before we talk more about LeBron, we can talk more about Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for all sports betting action. Baseball's in full swing. They've got the NBA and NHL playoffs. BetOnline has UFC. BetOnline has boxing. BetOnline has tennis, NFL futures, and more. The latest odds. The best online source for sports wagering info, news, scores, and live in-game betting while it's all going down. And if you're waiting around for the next NBA Finals game, good luck to you. The next game, Game 4, I believe, is sometime in mid-July. It's actually, I think, tonight, right? Isn't this the one? This was the one time that there was only one day off in between games? Yeah. Thunder, 5.5, 6-point favorite. Again, get down on it now or wait and do it while the game is actually taking place. And if you don't want to wait around for the basketball or whatever sport you happen to be into, head to BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker, live casino, blackjack, and more. Again, BetOnline. The game starts here. We had LeBron as a very solid early third-round pick, and that went well once again. LeBron was actually an early mid-second rounder on a per-game basis. He continues to defy the odds by playing in game after game after game and doing so while putting up big numbers. At this point, I don't even really know how he's doing it anymore, but he continues to do it. And so, I feel like we're sort of far enough along on this thing where year after, and I'm guilty of it, I think, not this 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, I was like, look, at some point, like, it's going to catch up with him. And then it didn't. And now I'm finally on team, like, you just can't really fade him until you see signs that the offensive stuff is actually slowing down. And it's just not. Now, he might do less as Luka gets sort of fully ingrained in the Lakers offense, because they were kind of flying by the seat of their pants a little bit late this last season, and it's going to slowly become more and more the Luka team and less the LeBron team over time. It's not going to be a thing that just, switch gets flipped overnight. But, LeBron, if you see the assists dip a little, you'll see the usage probably dip a tiny bit. But I'm not talking about next year. I'm talking about this last year. We felt he was a really good early third rounder. Even if he missed a few games, he'd be a pretty good early third rounder. Well, he didn't miss that many games, at least compared to what we all kind of assumed it might be. And so LeBron ended up being a really good early third round pick, playing in 70 out of 82 regular season games. That's about as good as anybody could have hoped that could be. Fourth name on our list, this was the end of the fourth round, was where I said, take a shot on Kawhi Leonard. And yeah, I mean, look, if you were in a head-to-head league, this is a relatively tough pill to swallow, if only because it took him so long to get back this year. And he only ended up playing 37 out of 82 regular season games. But in Kawhi's defense, the games he played were when it mattered for fantasy basketball. So while he was a guy that I really was mostly focused on the roto side, where you could deal with the games cap and you could just say, look, I'm going to hopefully get like a first round per game type of number out of a guy that we know is not going to play very much, then this went about the way you expected. If you were on the head-to-head side saying like, oh yeah, like I'm expecting him to be back in 5-6 weeks, and then he's just going to play the rest of the season while skipping back-to-backs, he missed more games than you expected. But again, this is not a play that I would have advised anyone in the head-to-head side to make. And I think we had an honorable mention at the end that would have replaced him in this fourth round. But to me, like, anytime you can get Kawhi Leonard outside the top 45, you almost have to do it, even with the injury risk, because you're talking about a guy that has mid first round per game potential, and you just don't get guys like that near the edge of the top 50. It just doesn't happen. I mean, you can look at rankings basically every year, pretty much forever, and then compare that back to where guys got drafted. And yeah, you'll sometimes get fourth rounders that jump up into the second round, but you almost never get them that jump into the first. Almost never. This year, for instance, the top 12 per game guys at the end of the season, and they weren't all first rounders, but a lot of them were, the lowest ranked preseason guy to end up inside the first round on a per game basis was Tyrese Maxey. And that took two high usage teammates going down. Maxey was a sort of mid to late 20s pre-rank. And second lowest was Damian Lillard, who was around number 23, 24. He finished in the first round. The big leap this year, if you want to point at it, obviously Dyson Daniels, who finished as a second rounder with a preseason rank of like 125. Nikola Vucevic finishing at 17. He was going outside the top 50. Jamal Murray was going outside the top 40. He finished in the second round. So you'll see these guys make a jump into the second round, but it's very rare that you see someone from the 40s or later make it into the first round. It'll happen every once in a while, but it's pretty stinking rare. And so that comes back to this whole Kawhi Leonard thing, which is, again, head-to-head side, you know he's going to miss too many games. It's going to be a massive headache. Yes, it would have potentially worked for you this year if you could have squatted on him and actually made your head-to-head playoffs. But he's a games cap roto play because you want that big per-game burst, and you kind of don't care how many games a guy misses. Fifth rounder, I had DeMar DeRozan, and, there just wasn't a player that I liked that was going at the end, be the beginning of the fifth round. Kawhi Leonard was kind of a complicated one to throw in that same general area. The guys that were going around Kawhi, I was generally not a massive fan of. These were guys like Jaylen Brown, Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, Emmanuel Quickley. These guys were all going in that same area. The real answer here would have probably been Darius Garland, but I was too low on him, or Jamal Murray if he fell that far. But he had some lingering injury stuff that kind of made us a little bit more reticent about going that direction, or the answer that probably makes sense for us going forward is to look for the safety plays in here. And I felt DeMar DeRozan was relatively safe play in this neck of the woods, and he turned out fine. Not great, not terrible. He was decidedly fine. Jared Allen was fine in this same area. Pascal Siakam was fine. Jared Allen actually was a little bit better than fine. We'll give him a little bit of credit there. But he was generally going a tiny bit later. In any event, this one I felt like was more of the, oh, well, if we got nothing else going on, just, take somebody that you think is pretty safe in this spot, and hopefully that'll pan out, and he was okay. End of the 6th round, I went Isaiah Hartenstein, and this was before he got ruled out for the first 5 or 6 weeks of the season, so you can pretty much put this one on the shelf and throw it out. Hartenstein ended up putting up numbers very close to this. He was number 69 in the 57 games he played, but if you knew coming into a year that a guy was going to just miss the first 15, you're not going to draft that guy. So I think we can kind of jump over Hartenstein. It probably would have been a perfectly fine pick if he wasn't injured, but then you also have to kind of take into account the Chet Holmgren injury, and so this one you can throw this one out, worry about it another time. That's an inconclusive final result on our 6th rounder. Early 7th round, I biffed it. You guys remember when we were going back through the buckets? This was the bucket that I screwed. Totally screwed the pooch on this one. What bucket number was that? Doesn't really matter, I guess. I can look at it. It was bucket 16. It was the Bogdan Bogdanovic, D'Angelo Russell bucket where I had these guys that just were absolutely terrible. I had downgraded guys like Jaylen Brown into this range, but he was never going to fall that far. And what we really needed to do was just to go down about a bucket and a half down the board and just take someone that was either very safe or had a little bit of built-in upside, like an Ivica Zubac. Jordan Poole would have been a guy you could take just a little bit later. But when you look back at kind of the way a lot of the players were ranked in here, a lot of them turned out to be bad. Drew Holiday, no, he was going a little bit later than that. But Franz had a messed up year with the injury. He was really good when he was healthy because of Paolo's injury. But DeAndre Ayton was bad. D'Angelo Russell was bad. Bogdan Bogdanovic was bad. Nick Claxton was bad. Cam Thomas was bad. Yusuf Nurkic was bad. A lot of these guys were in this area where the only right answer in this zone was probably Jordan Poole, maybe Josh Giddey, unless you went farther. And because this was an exercise in, who can I target that's going early in the 7th round? So basically pick 75 or 73 through 76, 77. There just wasn't a guy in there that I liked. And so I was like, all right, well, I guess we can take a guy from the middle of that round. And then that guy was bad too. Oh, well. So it goes. Who's next? CJ McCollum. This is such a boring call. He's basically the very last player going in the 8th round. He had a pre-rank of 95 instead of 96. I don't even really know why that was the direction we went. Like, this was a spot where if you go back to my buckets, I had a lot of really interesting players there. The problem is that it kind of stretched into the next bucket. So the guys that I liked in this range, where were they even? Where is CJ McCollum on my board? Oh, there he is. So this is like bucket 20, which basically stretched from pick 83 to 94. And then if you went past that, you had to go to bucket 21, which is one of my least favorites on the board. It's just like an area that I really, really, really didn't like. What was the right answer at pick 93, 94, 95, 96? Not McCollum. He was a disappointment, but not a disaster. The right answer was probably Kobe White. Might have been going, he probably went a little bit earlier than this. Keegan Murray was fine. Anthony Simons would have been fine there. Naz Reid would have been fine there. Jalen Suggs, before he got hurt, was probably borderline the correct answer. But this was just a bad spot to have a pick. End of the 8th round was a clunky spot. Guys that you wanted typically got scooped up too early. And it kind of forced you into flyer territory, which are guys that you're normally like, I'm hoping I can take this guy around 110. And it gets you a pick 95, and you're like, whoa. But I mean, you can look at all the players between 95 and 110 in my buckets. There were almost none of them that I liked, that I was pushing up from lower. Almost none. Mark Williams was one I liked, but you had to deal with the health stuff. So that was a Games Cap Roto play. That might have been it. I was down on, I got some guys wrong that I was down on, but I was down on almost everybody else. It was basically like a 15 player chunk here that I just wanted nothing to do with. And then you get into the flyers of guys like Norman Powell, Dyson Daniels, Cam Johnson, Trey Murphy III, and then Trace Jackson Davis and Brandon Pajemski, who didn't pan out quite as well. But did we feel like we were screwing ourselves out of potential value by taking someone like that at 95 instead of 115? Yeah, that's kind of a mental hurdle to get over. But if you really don't want, I don't know, Kyle Kuzma, just don't ever take him. Even if it seems like, he's still on the board at 108 or whatever, just don't do it. So unfortunately for this one, if you couldn't get anybody that I had in bucket 20, if you're looking back at that thing that, again, extended to pick 94, you were kind of screwed here. So you had to hope that you were in a league where somebody got left over for you, and that may or may not happen. Ninth round was Ivica Zubac on this board, which obviously is one that panned out extraordinarily well. But this is what we were talking about. Like, this is a guy that I had at bucket 18 who had a pre-rank that put him in that bucket 20 range. So that's the thing. Like, if Zubac was still around, terrific. If Jakob Poeltl was still around or Austin Reeves is still around, go get him. The problem is that a lot of the time these guys were already gone. So it goes. Ultimately, by the end of draft season, you had to take Zubac earlier than this. This was, this show was done with about 2 weeks to go before the season started. His pre-rank jumped and his ADP jumped as well. But when we did this show, he was one that actually made sense as an early 9th round pick. And a late 10th round pick, we had Zach Edey, but it didn't really matter because, that's flyer territory. And we had to eliminate names just because they weren't that close to a pre-rank of 120. But Amen Thompson could have fallen in there. We already talked about Dyson Daniels, Norman Powell, Cam Johnson. These were all guys that I liked as the sort of flyer range dudes. And honestly, if we're doing this exercise again next year, which I think I probably will, I don't know that it makes sense to have the 8th, 9th, and 10th rounds actually being categorized by, you're close to the front or you're close to the back end, because it's 100% a dice roll. Once you get past about pick 65, you basically no longer know what order the players are going to go in. You have the world's roughest idea that someone like CJ McCollum he's not going to get drafted at 75, and he's probably not going to fall to like 110. There are certain guys where you have a pretty good idea of where exactly they're going to be, but then there's other ones where, you might want Ivica Zubac, and you might have pick 80-something, and also 70-something, and you might have to just take him at 70-something because, okay, maybe his ADP was like 92 or whatever, but by the time your draft came around, he might have been going sometimes in the 70s. So there was no point in having Zach Edey here. There was no point in me saying, this is my favorite late 10th round pick. That's stupid. Just go to the Flyers board that I'll have for you guys. We'll have a Flyers show. We'll probably redo it every time Yahoo redoes their board. Which is, by the way, I say it with sort of like a flippantly, but it is important to redo it. I just, you do all this work and then the board shuffles and you're like, damn it, I got to do it again. But it's good. It's good content. They're good podcasts. You guys will enjoy them, even if there will be some repeats in there. And you know what? It keeps me on my toes too, because I look back at the old one and I try to build in one slide that's like, hey, this is what we did before, and these are the names that moved, and this is how we feel about them now. But again, like, there was no point in me having Zach Edey as my late 10th rounder when, Edey and Norm and Dyson and Cam Johnson and Derek Lively and whatever, all these guys, and Trey Murphy, these guys would all be perfectly fine grabs in that range. And then obviously Edey didn't do quite as well as the other dudes. You can also see the honorable mentions if you're watching with us on a video platform. Victor Wembanyama, obviously at the top of the board. Just threw him in there just so you guys would know that I wasn't anti-Victor. I just preferred Jokic. Dame as a late second or early third. He'll technically go as a late second because at this point his pre-rank was 23. So that was the, oh, you didn't get Cat, go ahead and get Dame. Early third round pick, I liked Tyrese Maxey as the name behind LeBron James. I got to be honest with you guys. I don't even remember being medium high on Maxey. So maybe there had already been some Joel Embiid news at this point. I have to think so, because going into draft season, I was not super high on Maxey. But then as the sort of run up was taking place and you're like, oh, everybody on this team is dead. Great. Okay. Tyrese is your very safe mid third round pick. Because then there were other guys like Jalen Williams going a tiny bit later, Jalen Johnson, even a little bit beyond that. Those guys, I'm guessing, and I'll go back and look at it and we'll probably do a show on it. Those guys probably pop up on the Dan's Perfect Draft mid slot or late slot editions. This one, again, just happens to be the early slot. I had D'Lo as the late 6th round pick, backup option to Isaiah Hartenstein. Hopefully you didn't end up with D'Lo there. Jordan Poole was the 7th. So the reason I should clarify on these, the reason that Jordan Poole was the backup to Bogdan Bogdanovic, even though overall I actually liked Poole more, was because Poole had a pre-rank of 79 at this point, which was not at all the beginning of the 7th round anymore. First pick of the 7th round is number 73. Jordan Poole is precisely, almost exactly the middle of that 7th round. So the reason that he was the backup here is I think because we had him as our 7th round guy to grab when I did the Perfect Draft middle slot. And technically overall, if you were like, hey, who do you prefer between Bogdanovic and Jordan Poole? You can go back and look at all the slides we did. Jordan Poole made far more appearances there. And then I did throw Austin Reeves in there as what would have been an early 9th round pick. Ivica Zubac's got the nod here, but I love both of those guys. And of course, that's the problem there is you're not going to get both of those guys in the 9th round. One of those guys you'd have to take in the 8th or even potentially the 7th if you're going to end up with both Zubac and Reeves. And the other reason that this exercise is a little bit stupid is that I'd rather have both of those guys over CJ McCollum. But I had to put CJ in the 8th round slot here because Reeves and Zubac had pre-ranks that put them in the 9th round. And that's why, again, when we do this coming year, the Dan's Perfect Draft shows, once you get past about the 6th, maybe the 7th round, 8th, 9th, 10th should all be mushed together. So this is the like Dan's Perfect Draft, early slot. Here are the first 7 rounds, maybe the first 8. But if we're going to talk about the 8th, then it's like, here's, 12 names that you can go for here and just hope that you get them. And here's the order they're generally going in drafts. So sort it out, do some game theory stuff, see if you can piecemeal this thing together. And that's the end of that. Overall, though, I think in terms of this early slot exercise, which, again, I really think we should probably grade out based on what I told you guys to do through the first 6 or 7 rounds. The early stuff was pretty sharp. Jokic, Wemby were both very good for the first. Towns, Dame in the second were both good. LeBron and Maxey were both good in the third. Kawhi was good if you're in a games cap in the fourth. DeMar was meh, but fine in the fifth. Hartenstein was hurt, so we can sort of dump that one. And then once you get to the 7th, that's where things take a little bit of a weird turn. And again, it's where pre-rank creates sort of bad content because me telling you, oh, Bogdan Bogdanovic is your early 7th round pick, even though we had been talking about Jordan Poole the entire draft season, it just sort of leads you guys down the wrong road. So I got to make some tweaks to the way this is presented. I apologize that it did create some confusion on who I actually want around pick 75 to 80. And I promise we'll get that fixed for August, September, October of this year, 2025. That's our show. That's our week here on Old Man Squad Fantasy Basketball. Appreciate you guys hanging with me while I only do 4 shows myself a week right now. June is a very tough month to do 5 shows in, and frankly, not really worth it when mental health is the other option. But you guys are the best. Thank you so much for all your likes, all your subscriptions. We'll just keep growing this thing. Shout out to Noah Rubin and all of his guests this week, as well as my good buddy Adam King, as we continue to build things out here on the Old Man Squad YouTube page. Again, like on the way out, subscribe no matter how you're taking the content. I'll see you over on social. Maybe I'm not on it that much this time of year also. At Dan Besbris. Until Monday. Oh, just made my face big at the very end of the show. Why? Nobody knows. Should have left it small. See you guys after the weekend. Oh, forgot to mention, if you're watching and you're wondering what's going on, why is Dan wearing a West LA shirt and a West LA hat? It's baseball Little League All-Star season. Shout out to my kid. See if we can take home some wins in a tournament here. I'm going to get slowly, you're going to see me get more and more tan, and then I'm going to wear sleeves up on podcasts so you can see the farmer's tan. No, I'm not going to do that. Goodbye, everyone.